Hello and welcome to the very first BigDashKnows, the podcast. This is going to be the very first episode of the podcast. And just to give people a little bit of what the podcast is going to be about or the flow of the podcast. I know if you already know or follow the YouTube channel, you know the type of content that I put out. A lot of it's always going to be Giants oriented, football oriented, because that's my wheelhouse. That's what I like to talk about. When it comes to this podcast series, what I'm trying to do is, still bring you that Giants content, the weekly updates, all the new stuff that's coming out, the breaking information, stuff like that. But in this podcast, I want to do that, but also want to talk about other things Giants related. They might not necessarily be, breaking news for the day or for the week and things like that. But nevertheless, it's still going to be Giants content. So without further ado, I want to start with this first episode for the podcast. And what I'm going to call this episode is the Odell Beckham Jr. episode. Keep it real simple. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this podcast. So first off, I just want to say that I'm tired of this whole Odell Beckham Jr. situation that's going on right now. So obviously we know that the man is healthy now. He's working out for teams. He had that one man combine or the one man workout last week, and then he's open to work out for other teams individually. And I'm happy to see it. I'm happy to see it. I've always been an Odell Beckham fan. Ever since we got him. I wouldn't say that I was a day one supporter, because to be honest, when we drafted Odell Beckham back in 2014, I wasn't heavy into you know um, all of like the mock drafts, all of the player breakdowns, all of the deep film study and things like that. I wasn't into it like that. You know what I mean? I was, you know, still a young man. Had other interests that was going on. I was a Giants fan through and through. I've been a Giants fan for a long time, all my life. But at that point in time, just a lot of things going on. I wasn't heavy into it like I am now. When it comes to player breakdowns, college prospects, things like that. But when we first got Odell Beckham Jr., when we picked him, I really didn't know who he was. And that year, as far as wide receivers go, I was a Mike Evans guy. I knew Odell Beckham was a guy that was predicted to be a first rounder, but I really didn't know Odell Beckham like that. I knew he was a good route runner. I knew he had, good hands, things like that, but I didn't know that he could be the type of player that he ended up, being, especially for the New York Giants. And I don't think a lot of people knew that either, because if that was the case, he would have been, the first overall pick or something like that. He would have been a lot higher, than where he went. But again, when we first drafted Odell Beckham, again, I admit I did not really know who he was. I didn't know, you know, how good he can be. And I remember the one thing about that too, going into the training camp, I was upset because he was always hurt, and rookie, the rookie mini camp, training camp. He had the hamstring issues and stuff like that, and it lingered on into the season. Sounds like somebody else, right? And then, he didn't play games. And then when he finally played, I remember it was that Atlanta game. And I remember when he finally got his touchdown, his first touchdown. And I remember it being just so smooth. Wasn't anything difficult that he did. It wasn't even anything difficult that he did. I know it was a slant route into the end zone. It might have been a zig. I can't fully remember now. I just know that he was able to shake loose from the cornerback. He made the touchdown catch look so easy with his hands. And then after that, it was a wrap. He gets up, he does one of his celebrations, and okay, Odell Beckham Jr. looks like he can be a top receiver for the New York Giants. Then you fast forward a couple of weeks later, and you get to that Giants versus Cowboys game, and then all of a sudden the catch happens, and then a star is born right after that. Boom, one-handed catch in the end zone for the touchdown, cornerback draped all over him, fingertips, fingertip catch, and a star is born. And the rest of that is history, man. And it looked for the next couple of seasons like this man was going to run and catch his way into a gold jacket or a yellow jacket, a Hall of Fame jacket. He was on that trajectory of being a Hall of Famer. Next thing you know, Dave Gettleman gets here. Pat Shermer's fired. Dave Gettleman gets here. McAdoo is fired. Hires Pat Shermer. Shermer ends up getting fired. Um, yeah, Shermer ends up getting fired. But before that, the trade happens. The trade happens. So Dave Gettleman thought it was smart to go in 2019 to go out there and trade the best player for the New York Giants, the superstar player for the New York Giants, especially after signing him to a new contract. And those picks end up turning into DeAndre Baker and then Dexter Lawrence. And at the time, this is before 2022 Dexter Lawrence, and people were upset about that trade. A lot of people were upset about the trade. A lot of people were upset with Odell Beckham too because of the whole interview that he had with Lil Wayne and Josina Anderson and the way he threw Eli under the bus. And that can be a whole other episode. At that point in time, in my opinion, and I got into arguments on Twitter with people, Eli was washed at that time. I always said when Odell Beckham extended Eli Manning's career at least a good 3 years. A good 3 years he extended Eli Manning's career. And then everything happens after that. He goes to the Browns, injury riddled seasons, and then he ends up at the Rams and he wins a Super Bowl, and probably could have won the MVP if he didn't tear his ACL in that Super Bowl. But that's where I wanted to start talking about this whole situation. Now, when we think about Odell Beckham now, he's flirting around with other teams. He had to visit with Dallas. He's come to the Giants. He's been a couple different places, on his world tour of trying to find a new team that he can possibly end his career with. That's his expectations. He's looking for a three-year deal where he can, set up shop with his family, possibly go into, retirement in a certain area. And, a lot of people have their different opinions of where that place should be. Me, as a Giants fan, I would always love to have Odell Beckham back here. He should have never left to begin with. But when I think about all the other things that are going on, again, Odell Beckham bursted into stardom, right? Center of attention everywhere he goes. And in some cases, that's a good thing. In some cases, it might be a bad thing. We've seen situations in hotels. We've seen situations in airports and airplanes, things like that. But I'm just talking about Odell Beckham, the player right now today, coming off of those injuries. And mind you, he did look fantastic in that workout that he had for all those teams in Arizona. Cutting off of that knee, the speed looks there. Of course, his hands are still, no question, except for that Green Bay game. But, as a Giants fan, you know what it is. And that's just me throwing a sneak shot. And I do apologize for that right away. But we already know Odell Beckham can catch. We just wanted to know, can he stay healthy? And does he look somewhat like the Odell of old? Now, I'm going to admit, okay, the man is 30, a couple ACLs, issues like that. So I don't expect him to be OBJ. I expect him to be Odell Beckham Jr., the father. The 30-year-old version of himself is what I expect to see. But still, that version of Odell Beckham, to me, is a number one wide receiver for the New York Giants. He might not be a number one in a lot of other places, but for the New York Giants, he absolutely is or would be a number one wide receiver. And he flirts, and he puts out hints. Like the newest hint this morning I saw is that, I don't know where people are quoting me at $20 million per year. He'd never asked for $20 million. Well, here's the question, though. Prior to the free agency starting, we didn't know what the wide receiver market was going to look like. And now that the wide receiver market has opened up a little, we're seeing that a lot of these wide receivers are not getting that same money that, the wide receivers got last year. And it's not the best crop of wide receivers, free agent wide receivers either. So when you throw Odell Beckham in the mix of that, he is the prize when it comes to the wide receiver market right now. He's the best option out there. But at what price? Now, he said he's not asking for $20 million, but what are you asking for? What is that number? Is it 17, 18? Is it 15? Is it 14? What is that number that you're actually looking for? And like I said, prior to the wide receiver free agency as a whole starting up, what was Odell Beckham's price. Now, even the media was saying $15 to $20 million because that's what they thought the market was going to demand for wide receivers. And now that we see it's something different, and I don't know how that happened, like the owners collaborated together, said, no, we're not going to push these wide receivers to get that top money like the wide receivers got last year. Now, again, this is a different crop of wide receivers. It's not the same crop of wide receivers as last year as far as talent goes. You know, you got a couple of solid guys in this free agency market, and you're starting to see that price come back to reality. So to me, with the history of Odell Beckham, I understand his name is his name, but the history of Odell Beckham, if you want to be recent with it, you have a slew of injuries. He missed out for a whole year. So asking for multiple year commitment is one thing, but also asking for a certain amount of money and those years is an entirely different thing. And I don't think, and I'm no specialist. Like I said, I'm no specialist when it comes to contracts and NFL, anything like that. I'm just a guy that talks Giants football. I'm thinking that he might have to come off of that number a little bit. And who knows what that number is again, because, again, he never said a number. But if $20 million is floating out there in social media, floating out there in sports media, that number had to come from somebody. So whether the agent himself was trying to get into negotiations and start off high, that way you can end up with maybe the 18, 17 range, somebody said $20 million. That wasn't a made-up number. I'm pretty sure somebody, just like it wasn't a made-up number for Daniel Jones when people were talking about 45, ended up being a real number, and you see where he settled at. You know, same thing goes for Odell Beckham Jr. But again, I would love to have Odell Beckham back on the New York Giants because for me, not only is it nostalgic, but it also fits a need for the New York Giants. You just signed your quarterback. And the way that his contract is set up, you're looking to try to go all in for the next couple of years to try to get a playoff push, and ultimately, well, you already have a playoff push, but you're trying to see if you can get to the big game. And I'm thinking about the talent that they added, you know, some of the receivers, even though it's not an entirely revamped team, there's some key players and key positions that make this team a lot different. First thing I would say would be just the signing of Darren Waller at tight end. If you can get the best out of Darren Waller, that's going to be something, especially for Daniel Jones. He's never had a weapon like that, ever. And then the idea of adding the idea of adding Odell Beckham to that scenario, you know, to me, it's like sky's the limit. Yeah, I know this is not the Odell Beckham of old, but the Odell Beckham in this system, you know, people have to respect him. And when you respect the wide receivers, that opens up the run game. And we still happen to have one of the best running backs in the league right now in Saquon Barkley. Now, he's on the tag as well. That's an entirely different situation. Maybe that's another episode, too. Does he play on the tag? Do we work out a long-term deal where we can bring that cap hit down and get even more relief? That's something that could be. That's something that could happen. But again, I'm just thinking about what this team could be with the acquisition of Odell Beckham Jr. Now, one thing I will also say, too, because, again, Odell Beckham is not, you know, he's not getting away with anything. Obviously, money is a factor here. The man wants to get paid. That's clear. We all know what happened in the contract with the Los Angeles Rams. I'm not saying that he's hurting for money or anything like that, but we already know he did his contract to be paid in Bitcoin, and if the reports are correct, he ended up like almost owing money for playing for the Rams, and it's crazy because you have fads and things like that where cryptocurrency is a thing, and then look what happens. It crashes a little bit and people lose money. So I think money has a big part of his decision. I think that if it wasn't about the money, he probably would already be a New York Giant. But here's the thing. If Odell Beckham wants to be a New York Giant, then Odell Beckham would have been a New York Giant by now. Because, again, you don't have multiple conversations and people show interest in you, without some type of terms being considered or extra talks between the GM and Odell Beckham's representative. Now, maybe he doesn't want to play for the number that the Giants are offering him. But ultimately, again, this is his decision. Same thing for Saquon Barkley. If they want to be a New York Giant, there is a contract on the table for them to sign. Whether they like the numbers or not, it's their decision whether they want to be a New York Giant or not. Now, when it comes to Saquon Barkley, it's a little bit different. Obviously, as a running back, you probably only get one big contract in your whole career. We've seen that, contracts for running backs don't always pan out. Most recently, you've seen Zeke, you've seen Todd Gurley, things like that, where that second contract does not add up because these running backs have a short shelf life. Now, Saquon Barkley had his own history of injuries as well, and rumor is he turned down a deal at the buy that was worth $12.5 million, and now he's on the tag making just a little bit over $10 million, and pretty much with that market of free agency with the running backs, they're not getting paid a lot of money either. So the most money might be that 1 year $10 million deal that the Giants are offering for the tag. Now, again, will the Giants give him a little bit more money overall, just to bring down the cap hit for this year, just so you can have a little bit more space and be able to maneuver a little bit more if you want to add some more players? Absolutely. But again, if these guys want to be New York Giants, then they'll be New York Giants. The choice is up to them. Team has already offered them contracts. Yeah, so again, just getting back to Odell Beckham. Imagine the news, just the news of Odell coming back to New York, how that hits. It absolutely hits. But I wanted to talk about something else because there's a lot of positives. There's a lot of positives to Odell Beckham coming back to the New York Giants. But there also is a negative, in my opinion. Now, this is my opinion. So now, I'm on the side that believes that Daniel Jones has gotten better. Now, I understand that the stats don't show it, but I'm talking about on-the-field play, progression, accuracy, anticipation, pocket awareness, not taking all those crazy hits, getting out of bounds, being efficient, getting first downs. Daniel Jones, in my opinion, has gotten better. How better? How much better? That's yet to be determined. But one thing I would like to talk about is if you do add a guy like Odell Beckham Jr. to this roster, it kind of forces the quarterback to throw that way, because you saw what happened when he wasn't getting the ball. Even when he was playing with Eli, when he wasn't getting the ball, you saw it on the sideline just a little bit. Now, that's competitiveness. I understand that. And then when you get to Cleveland and Baker, when Baker had one of his best years, when he took Cleveland to the playoffs, Odell Beckham's numbers weren't where you would expect Odell Beckham's numbers to be. And then, of course, once he goes to LA, he's not wide receiver. Well, he's not the first option in that system. It was Cooper Kupp. But you saw how efficient he can be. Now, with the New York Giants, he would absolutely be wide receiver one. And with the label, not necessarily the assignment, but with the label of being a wide receiver one, you anticipate a certain amount of targets, a certain amount of catches per game for the season. However you want to count your stats, you expect a certain level of volume of throws, receptions, things like that. Now, for me, with Daniel Jones' second year into the system, one thing that Daniel Jones did not have to worry about was having a number one receiver. Like I said, again, I'm talking about the negative way, because obviously you want to have that wide receiver one. But the negative effect to having a wide receiver one is possibly forcing throws. Instead of the offense flowing naturally and you just hitting the open man in stride and progression, you might tend to favor a player. Now, that's not a bad thing. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it could also be a negative when you're forcing throws to one particular person and it affects the flow of the game, especially if the chemistry's not there or if it's just a bad game for the receiver and the quarterback duo. So when you're thinking about things like that, I'll just say that I'm going to hope for the best. If we're able to get Odell Beckham here, fine. If he doesn't come to the Giants, fine. If he goes to a rival like the Dallas Cowboys, fine. We get to play him and hopefully we can beat him up 2 games a season. But I'm just thinking about, for Daniel Jones, the pros to having Odell Beckham is having that wide receiver one, being able to open up the whole offense, helping the run game, helping out the other wide receivers because you're grabbing so much attention. And also Darren Waller doing the same for Odell Beckham, snatching that safety attention, Odell Beckham over the top, things like that. It's a bunch of positives to having Odell Beckham. But again, the negative would be, do you stunt the growth of your quarterback? And I know it sounds crazy because even me saying this now, because I remember Josh Allen, when he got Stephon Diggs, he excelled. And it should absolutely be the same thing. But we already see how Stephon Diggs is when he's not getting the ball. You're going to hear about it. Rightfully so, you're going to hear about it. But for Daniel Jones, and I think he has the mental toughness to handle a guy like Odell Beckham. But you just wonder if he might force a couple of throws, a couple of bad throws, because again, we've seen one, if you want to call it a good year, I will say a better year from Daniel Jones. But do you want to throw a bona fide star wide receiver like Odell Beckham or even like DeAndre Hopkins? Do you want him to be in that type of system where you're gonna force possible throws and stunt the growth of the quarterback? So that's just some things I was thinking about when it comes to Odell Beckham. Again, this is the Odell Beckham episode. And again, I'm just talking to you guys about my thoughts about the situation because again, I'm just ready for it to be over. Now, and it's crazy too because it's not like he's even a part of the team right now. But with his history with the New York Giants, when you think of Odell Beckham, you think about New York. You see him in blue. You see number 13. You see the one-handed catch. That's Odell Beckham to a lot of people, and I would love to see them. I would love to see him back in blue, to end his career. Because I already think he's going to get the one-day contract where he retires a Giant. I think that's already written in the stars. But again, Odell Beckham as a New York Giant, I hope to see it. I understand if it doesn't happen. But again, if it does happen, man, that's going to be a story. That's going to be a fantastic story. So I'm going to go ahead and end that podcast here. Just wanted to talk about Odell Beckham, the situation. I'm tired of what's going on with the back and forth. I just want the situation to be done. I want to thank everybody for listening, especially if you're listening this long. Shout out to you. If you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. I plan on having these podcasts put up in different platforms as well. Working on that, man. Working hard, man. Trying to get, this thing off of the ground. I love the success that it's having already. I'm almost at 2,000 subscribers on YouTube, and we'll see what the next steps are, man. We'll see where the path takes us, and things like that. But again, I want to thank you guys for vibing with me. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you're listening on YouTube. If you're listening on the podcast platforms, go ahead and hit that like and share. It'll be much appreciated. But that's the episode, podcast number 1. Big Dash Knows. Thank you.